I'm your host, Joe Gilbert. I'm with, once again, Taylor Jedrzejek. Taylor, how are we doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Pretty good. Yeah, it's Thursday, almost Friday, so we're
Yeah,
almost there.
almost done with the week.
We're almost done. But yeah, we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. It's been a busy second week of the year, or off free agency off season for the Browns. But before we get to that, this is once again brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. For first time depositors, enter in the code WFNY at checkout, and Underdog will match your deposit up to $100. It's a great platform if you're tired of DFS salary system. There's tons of different game types, drafts every night, and for every sport. Don't forget to use WFNY at checkout for your first time deposit matched up to $100. That's our friends at Underdog Fantasy. So let's get to the biggest news of the week. So we last joined together. It was what, Friday? I think it was Friday.
I don't even
Last
remember
Friday.
now. Yeah.
It was. I think it was last. Yeah, last Friday. Um, we went over, kind of discussed all the first week stuff, but the second week has been pretty busy too. The biggest one coming yesterday when the Browns traded their second round pick, number 42 overall, to the Jets for Elijah Moore, and number 74, which was in the third round, the Jets' third round pick. So they're basically moving down 32 spots and getting Elijah Moore for that. So what was your initial thoughts on kind of getting Elijah Moore?
I think it was the last piece that the last conceptual piece the Browns really needed. They needed a kind of shifty, quick wide receiver to complement Amari Cooper, who doesn't quite have that top end speed anymore, and Donovan Peoples-Jones, who never really had it.
Right.
So, it's a perfect complement for what they're looking to do as an offense. And now I was thinking about it. This might be the most complete Browns receiving core that they've had since they came back. You have someone that fills all the roles and that you're confident can actually do the job.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Um, yeah, this is probably the most versatile group we've had in a while. I would say I would agree with that on that. Yeah, Elijah Moore was a favorite of mine from the draft. What year was that? That was 2021. He was my fifth overall receiver. So I really liked him coming out, and to get him for basically moving down around is pretty incredible. Uh, I saw on Twitter, I forget what writer was. The Browns are the team that you want to trade your wide receiver for if you want to lose your trade.
That's not a bad distinction to have.
Right. Yeah. This is the second time where they've really gotten a good receiver for a very, very low draft capital. Um, the really nice thing is, so he has produced in his career, but his production hasn't been super high because of the quarterback play. So he's definitely going to get a nice change of pace when he's playing with Deshaun Watson. But the big
Yeah.
thing is, it's just we're basically drafting a receiver at 42 who already has 2 years experience, and he's still on his rookie contract. So it's like the best of both worlds.
Yeah,
I
he's
thought.
scheduled to make like $3.2 million over the next 2 years.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
he doesn't hurt us at all in
Yeah.
that regard.
That's why I thought this is a great trade. I think he's better than any receiver they could have gotten in free agency. He's better than McCole Hardman, I thought, because McCole has been in the league longer and he hasn't produced as much really as.
And he's had Patrick Mahomes to throw to him.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another. Yeah, definitely. And then it's just one of those things we talked about. We needed more athleticism, speed in the receiving core, and Elijah Moore is pretty much that guy. He was his raw score and and all that. Athletic testing was pretty high. Besides his height and size, he
Yeah.
kind of blew everything off the charts for the other stuff. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see it. Him him kind of uh, getting more opportunities with a better quarterback. He has a better receiver than he's probably ever had with him in Amari Cooper. So it's gonna be fun to watch. And as you said, the versatility of the group is so much better than we came out of last year. And we only had to add one guy. So it's
Yeah. It was the piece that they were missing last season, and
yeah,
as Andrew Berry has done pretty much all off season long, they've just they've really learned from last season. They
right.
they knew what the gaps were. We knew what the gaps were, and
Mhm.
they haven't veered from filling those holes.
Yep. Yeah. And it's nice to get another guy that can separate. That's the one thing that Donovan Peoples-Jones kind of struggles with, kind of getting separation in his routes. But Elijah Moore is one of the better ones at doing that. He adds to Amari Cooper, does really well with that. So, and another guy that kind of can make plays after the catch too, which is something they didn't really have overall. Um, Donovan's not a big kind of after the catch guy, and Amari does, but he was kind of the vocal point, so he was very tightly covered. So I thought just getting another guy that can really get open and make plays after the catch is going to be a really kind of fun addition to this offense.
Yeah, and to do it for essentially dropping 30 spots in the draft,
Yeah,
you're
makes it even
getting a
better.
guy who's a known commodity. Like what he's able to do in this league when he has a quarterback that can actually throw the ball within his general vicinity.
Mhm.
Which we saw the stats for that today. We were sharing that around in the Discord about
Yeah,
how he had 66 targets last year and 37 of them were off, or 36 of them were off target.
yeah, and he still had 37 receptions,
Yeah.
right? Which
So
is
like
crazy.
obviously that he's got the talent to produce when the quarterbacks can deliver him the football.
Yeah. Another I forget what the exact stats are, but something when Wilson wasn't his quarterback, his stats were like so much better when any other quarterback like Joe Flacco. So it just shows you that I think his team is kind of holding him back. I've seen so many videos already of plays that he's wide open and just the quarterback's missing him. So yeah, I'm super excited to see him in the orange and brown next season, and should be fun to add that kind of playmaking in the receiving core.
Yeah.
Uh, the Browns also added to their offense in the tight end room. That was Jordan Atkins, 2-year deal. Very familiar with Deshaun Watson. He played with him in Houston. Um, he he was actually pretty productive last season. He had 5 touchdowns, 37 receptions, 495 yards. He just seems like a guy that he's pretty much what we thought Harrison Bryant would be.
Yeah.
He's going to be the second target for him as a tight end, and he's a big guy too, so he's going to give him another touchdown or another red zone target. So, what's your thoughts on Akins?
Um just good solid depth for that room, and
Yeah,
Joku, as good as he's been, has not really gone to it. I think, has he gone a full season in his career yet? I don't think so.
yeah, that's a good point. I can't.
Like so having that kind of guy, especially one that Watson is familiar with, and it, he seems to. What does he have? 44 catches in his career and has 7 touchdowns.
Right?
So
Yeah,
his touchdown to catch ratio is pretty high,
yeah,
all things considered.
mm,
Um, so it's another just Like we've said, this team doesn't have the money to make big, huge, gigantic swings on paying guys a ton of money to come here and be Pro Bowlers. These are guys that you expect to be good in their role. These are edge of roster guys.
Yeah.
Like the top, what would you say, the top 30, 35 positions on this roster are set?
Yeah. Pretty
After
much.
that, you just need to find guys, to improve in the last 18 slots.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's building depth right now.
Yeah,
For
and
most of the roster.
we'll talk about more about it, but they still need to do some of that.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, especially on defense. But the offense really seems like they're pretty well stacked throughout the most of the units. There's a couple places, but yeah, they definitely are looking strong on in the tight end room. Three guys that are playable. Last year there was only basically just two playable guys, but it's nice to see them add a guy that's kind of good familiarity with Watson. So that's another added key to Akins. And just we're gonna experience injuries, as you said. Njoku, I don't think has played all 16 or 17 games now in a season, and always getting depth is a smart move for any team. We always talk about before the season what kind of the roster looks like from just the starter standpoint, but when you go through the season, there's injuries and you guys are out, and people have to step up behind them, and so this is a good depth piece to kind of continue that trend, especially on offense.
Mm-hmm.
Last thing on offense. Last thing on offense. The Browns re-signed Joshua Dobbs for a 1-year contract. He pretty much looks like the guy to be the backup quarterback. I like it. What's your thoughts on Dobbs?
I like that they're bringing him back. Obviously, he made an impact in the locker room because when he was getting his chance to start games in Tennessee, the locker room seemed to be very behind it.
Yep.
A lot of tweets came out about that. So it's good to have him back for that reason. I'm not entirely sure I'm like super comfortable with him being the backup the whole season. I wouldn't be upset, but I would not be happy. Let's put it that way.
I gotcha.
Because I mean, obviously, if Deshaun Watson gets hurt, your season's over anyway. But
right, that's what my big point is.
But Dobbs feels like someone you probably couldn't even talk yourself into. Yeah, we could go out there and win 2 or 3 games with him. Right. That's not a good recipe, I think. But
right.
I don't think he's a bad guy to have around. You're going to need 3 quarterbacks. I don't know if they plan on keeping Kellen Mond around, but every roster carries 3 quarterbacks now. So
yeah, I like it. I always like when teams kind of have their backup quarterback kind of fit the mold of the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
So you don't really have to really kind of blow up your offense. Obviously, you're not gonna have them throw 100 times, but you don't have to change the scheme as much as like say Brissett. Like that was a big change because there are 2 separate different quarterbacks. So that's a nice added thing. I do agree. He's not. I don't know. It's one of those things where if Watson is out, the season's kind of.
Yeah, you're kind of
you're in trouble already, right? Yeah, you're not going to get like a Foles. That doesn't happen often when like a backup quarterback comes in and actually plays well. But it's a good position. I'm glad he's back. He seems like a great locker room guy, as you said. And with this team, I think locker room is important. past couple of years, there's been a little murmurs and kind of stuff throughout that there's a little locker room distrust. So it's nice to kind of have a guy that's familiar with locker room and is a good teammate, and people like him. So that's
There's
always
one
a
thing
good
that
thing
this
for a
Browns
backup.
regime does. It's get rid of malcontents as quickly as possible.
That is true. Yes.
Aside from Kareem Hunt, but I don't think he
Right.
was really a malcontent with the players. I think.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Yeah,
I think
he
he
was
was
like best
just.
friends with Chubb. So
Yeah, like he wanted out. He wanted to be the primary guy somewhere.
yeah,
But I think last year proved he can't be that anymore. But
right.
with you think back to the day that the video came out from Odell's dad and how that like he was sent home that day and never saw Berea again.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
Baker once it came out that the Browns were pursuing Watson, he was never heard from again.
Yeah, Jadeveon
Well,
Clowney.
Jadeveon Clowney was sent home as soon as everything came out, and
Yeah.
Myles Garrett has been pretty. He hasn't been shy when it comes to talking about those incidents.
Yeah.
Um,
And obviously, some of these things could have been just played away by winning. Like a lot of losing can bring up these kind of issues.
Yeah,
but,
and it's not like they've even done a ton of losing. It's just
right.
been
Yeah.
frustrating losing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Kind of in a similar stroke as Dobbs, but a better player. Browns are re-signing Anthony Walker, a linebacker, for 1 year. I thought we kind of talked about it in our last pod. Middle linebacker was the open spot, kind of the big kind of open spot on the defense that was still missing, and getting a guy that's familiar with the well, it's going to be a different defense, so I can't say that, but familiar with the locker room, and played well last year, and the year before, actually, before he got injured. So I really like this signing. What's your opinion on Anthony Walker?
I would have been really upset if he left. Not because I think he's that much of a difference maker on the field, and that he would make the only team he visited was the Commanders. That he would make the Commanders that much better. But I think he makes some kind of difference on the field in that the defense plays better with him out there. He's able to lead the way, that he's able to be a coach on the field. And we saw what happened last year when we didn't have him out there and then started losing more and more linebackers. So if for anything, it was a good signing just to have that continuity. Again, it was a move that the players celebrated when he was re-signed. There were a whole bunch of tweets followed real quickly saying that they wanted him back. And Owusu Kormoa tweeted even before that they wanted him back. So it's
There's
it's not a huge move, but it's an impactful move,
right?
And that's kind of been the theme of the Browns offseason.
Yeah. This is a good locker room addition. As you said, there's a lot of players that were talking beforehand that they wanted him back, and you could see how much of a leader he is kind of in the locker room just based on those reactions. So the only issue would be kind of the injury, just seeing where he's at health wise. I would assume it was pretty early in the season. It was
week 3.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so he should be, I would assume, full go during training camp. But that's just something to kind of watch too. There's a hell of a lot of linebackers on this team that are coming off injuries. So that's something I wonder if they're gonna still kind of address, or if they're kind of comfortable with it. Obviously, I think you do the physical and all that, so they know where he's at. But
and they were a big part of his rehab. So
right, yeah, that's definitely true too. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see if they do any more additions there. But I think we were kind of happy with a linebacking core when Anthony was in there and when JOK was playing. They were playing okay, and this was behind non-existing defensive tackles.
Yeah, you're basically playing a 2-4,
right,
or a 2-3 defensive front, because
right.
the guys you have out there aren't doing anything for you.
Yeah. So you added Delvin Tomlinson and Hurst and Hill to your defensive line interior. So it should help their job too. So yeah, I'm very happy that Anthony is back. He was one of the guys that I saw on the free agent wire still that I wanted him back. So I'm very happy that he's back there. Um, any other thoughts on Walker before we get to some other stuff?
No, I mean,
Okay.
another, like I said, another not not a big move, but an impactful one.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we get to who they lost this week, I just want to go over the from the last time we were talking. Hurst and Hill contracts came out. The guaranteed, I believe, Hurst had no guaranteed money, and then I believe Hill had I think it's like 500,000 or something really very low. So we kind of talked about that in the last one where the guaranteed money would kind of tell us what the Browns think of them going into the season. Hurst is the wild card with no guaranteed money. And Hill, it seems like he'll probably stick. I would assume, but it's just something to talk about there. I thought it was interesting. We talked about in the last one where those two were kind of wild cards that were going to have to fight for a spot on the team, and I think the contracts are telling us that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the one thing that the kind of Browns lost this week is they didn't lose, but in free agency, one of their free agents left, and that's Dearness Johnson. It kind of it wasn't surprising. Obviously, I think Dearness wanted a bigger role, but it kind of it was more in terms of what the Browns have on their roster right now in terms of running back. It's pretty much Chubb and Ford, and then Kelly you have in there. But what's your kind of viewpoint of where this the running back group is right now?
I think you're probably still you probably need to add someone. I think guys like Felton and Schwartz are probably training camp cuts this year. I think obviously they like Jerome Ford, so
Yeah.
but you can't go in with just two. You need
Yeah.
3 or 4, and I mean they'll be able to find guys on the fringes. They'll probably draft one.
The free agent market is always super slow on running backs because no one wants to pay them.
I mean Zeke Elliott is still out there.
Yeah,
not that I'd want him. I think he's well beyond his usefulness. But
I don't know about Kareem Hunt either. So I think he'll probably leave too.
Yeah.
So I think they really like Jerome Ford. He obviously performed well as a returner last season, and then
surprisingly well.
Yeah, very surprisingly well. And then as a in the preseason, he played very, very well. He's probably the standout guy. And so it was a really bad preseason in terms of the Browns. If you go back to that, but Jerome Ford was one of the standouts there, and I think they actually really do like him. And him being the backup to Chubb, I wouldn't be surprised if they go with that. I think they'll obviously maybe sign a very low price running back to kind of give them depth. But I can see them going with Chubb and Ford and kind of going with that group. It should be interesting to see. So those are the big signings and trades this week. It was another busy week for the Browns, and we're not even all the way through here as we talk on Thursday. So they've filled a lot of the roles that we've talked about, both beginning of the free agency and then even last week what the remaining stuff was. If you had to say, what would you be kind of the biggest hole you have left on the roster
I mean, at this point, I think it's still defensive depth.
Yeah.
You have a solid front line, but defense doesn't work that way. Not anymore.
Right.
It's just a matter of getting more rotational guys. You probably need one more defensive tackle, at least. But now that you're not picking until 73, you can't really forecast what's going to be down there.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just a matter of finding some more depth pieces. Like at this point, the Browns have done well enough in the first, what are we on, 9 days of this process, that anything they do at this point is kind of gravy.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I would agree with that. The depth is on defense is definitely the thing to watch. But I think the number one thing is definitely there's still kind of two big holes on the defensive line. As defensive tackle, I don't think you have a surefire starter next to Tomlinson. Obviously, the two guys they added this year could be those guys, but there's just nothing that you can call right now. Say, hey, I feel comfortable with this defensive tackle next to Tomlinson. So I would say that, and then edge rusher. I think they might want to add maybe a veteran situational pass rusher because you do have two young guys. You have the Obo you signed this year, and then Alex Wright for last year, and he drafted. So it's nice to have youth there, but I think you might want to have just one kind of. It doesn't have to be a starter type. It can just be a rotational kind of pass rusher. There's quite a few of them still out there. Those aging guys are kind of stay out there until later in the offseason. So I think adding a rotational edge rusher would be a smart move too. Those are probably the biggest two spots. But yeah, overall, just adding depth to the roster, especially on defense, will be important. And that's what you do in the draft. That's what you do in the later times in free agency. So there's a lot of room for that. They did sign. I don't know if I skipped it or not. They did sign a couple, actually, some nice free agent special teamers. One of them was Michael Ford. Mike Adams, I believe, is the other one, and then he's a linebacker. And then they brought back what's his name, Jordan
Kunasek.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't pronounce it. I couldn't think of it and pronounce it. But yeah. So those are three. That's another kind of a depth piece we don't even talk about. Special teams is a huge part. We've seen it be very detrimental when you have a bad unit. So adding those kind of three guys, and they've all, based on their history, they played well on that unit. So those are kind of underrated signings that you don't talk about during the off season, but once you get to the season and they start making plays, or you don't have a bad unit, you kind of you notice it. So those are a couple good under the radar signings too.
That's the thing about special teams, is it doesn't need to be great.
Yes.
When it's great, it's noticeable. When it's bad, it's noticeable.
Yes. When it's in the middle, you don't notice, and that's fine.
Yeah, when you don't notice special teams, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Other than that, it's been a busy week as we were talking about, but I would expect the Browns probably continue to look kind of make some trades, or maybe look to add some of the veteran guys.
I don't know what they got left to trade.
Right, that's true. Might be players. Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't think. I know there's been a lot of talk about like Newsome and all that. I don't think they're going to trade the cornerback depth, because
you don't have depth anywhere else on the defense.
Right. Yeah, and you need quarterback might be the biggest position that you need depth at, Just ask Kansas City last year. I think they lost two of their guys in the playoffs, and they had to play three rookies or whatever, and they performed well. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something they got to build up, and I wouldn't, because Newsom's still's on a rookie contract. Emerson is. Denzel is obviously in the second year of his big contract. But yeah, you don't want to create holes, especially when you don't need to. They're not in a bad cap position. That's another thing we can talk about right now. They really haven't spent that much, and they made
No,
a
they
lot
still
of
got like 10,
improvements.
$11 million.
Yeah, and they made a lot of improvements. It's been a very shrewd offseason for Andrew Berry. I think he's learned some things over his time. First year, he kind of spent a little too much, I would say, on John Johnson and Austin Cooper. I don't think they turned out very well, and he spent a lot on them. But he kind of figured out you got to kind of hit your spots and kind of go with the value picks rather than kind of making those big splash signings. Yeah. So other than that, that's it. We'll be back closer to the draft probably, or if there's any big news coming in the next few weeks, we'll be back. So yeah, thanks for joining us, everybody. This is another edition of the WFNY BrownsCast, part of the Evergreen Podcast Network. I'm your host, Joe, and this was Taylor, and thanks for joining us, everybody.
See ya.